welcome to episode 228 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Lydia Creech,
Dylan Moore,
Andrew Swafford,
and Jessica Carr.
In today's episode, we will be celebrating the recently departed 2018 with our best movies of 2018. Our top 10, the list everybody's been waiting for. They're waiting so long, they waited a whole new year for it. Top 10 movies. Everybody's looking for these, you know? There's never a time when they're tired of top 10 lists. Never a time. That's it. That's all I had. Let's jump in. We're just going to go in with number 10. Dylan, you're leading us off. Get us started. Number 10, Avengers Infinity War.
Oh, God. No, don't. I don't know.
Excuse me. The Green Fog. I'm sorry. I get those confused. Sorry. Go ahead.
Are you... well, I think it'd be maybe more of the Purple Fog. If it was, you'd think. Thanos putting you to sleep? No?
Will you please introduce your movie?
Good job, Andrew. The Green Fog is...
Dun-dun.
Ooh, off to a good start.
Green Fog is a recent Guy Madden film. He's mostly known as a experimental filmmaker who does really strange things with genre, specifically condensing them down to really like 10-minute short stories, particularly in Forbidden Room, where he explores a lot of 20s, 30s, and 40s adventure stories, and just does weird things visually, and the acting is intentionally bad, and it usually mounts in a lot of laughter when I watch it. But so the Green Fog seems like his most recent venture, and I was able to catch it right before putting up a top 10 list, and it's a strange bit of business because it's even more condensed than the movie Forbidden Room I just described, which it's basically like a city symphony set in San Francisco, but instead of it being set to a really symphonic piece of music, he decides to basically make a supercut video of all the movies he wants to that are set in San Francisco. And each one, it carries through with basically transition points in movies, people traveling, people walking to places, and it kind of leaves you in a state of suspension, and it comes to a very particular point where when he first tries to introduce a conversation happening between two people, and he cuts out the dialogue, and it's just this ridiculous jump cut between people staring at each other, emoting at each other, but never, most of the time, hearing what they say to one another. And it is very jarring, and I was very surprised that he committed to doing that for basically the whole movie. Centering around this notion of San Francisco being taken by and surrounded by a mysterious green fog that does weird things to space and time and where the characters think they are. And there's, I think during the second half of the movie, a special cameo by Chuck Norris, and boy, did it take me a solid 5 minutes while in the middle of it to decide whether or not that's actually Chuck Norris, because he did not have his mustache and he was thoroughly smooth-faced, and I was very confused why he decided to put Chuck Norris in this montage of a film. But he did it, and it kind of works in a strange way of being in a suspended emotional space with Chuck Norris's face, and it ended up very funny. So I'm curious who else put this on their top 10. It kind of got high up on mine because it just hit me just right. But Andrew, what'd you think about it?
This is on my top 10 as well. And that was a very ambitious description of the Green Fog. The elevator pitch is it's a remake of Vertigo without using any footage from Vertigo. So he's like cobbling together all of these other movies that match the beats and the character interactions of Vertigo. You have dozens and dozens of dudes who all kind of look like Jimmy Stewart, all having conversations that mirror the ones that happen throughout Vertigo. What you pointed out, the conversations having the dialogue cut out of them, which makes them kind of uncanny and humorous at the same time. And the movie has a great, double-edged tone to it, where you can read every scene as very funny, or it can also read as very ominous and strange at the same time. There's a great score by Kronos Quartet that I think is one of the best scores of the year. It's just really unsettling all throughout the film. And it's a movie that, as it goes on and all of the illusions continue piling up, it is sort of overwhelming, and you realize how many just small things that you see in movies, things that are getting characters from point A to point B, are just recycled from previous ones. And it seems like Guy Maddin is sort of playing with building blocks in a way, or playing with memes that he's finding in movies. But it also feels like movies from the past are like haunting the movies of the present by us having to go through the motions of these familiar beats or tropes or whatever you want to call them.
Or, I mean, in the case of San Francisco, just familiar spaces, right? I mean, even if not beats in a, more dramatic way, it's just like literally all these characters at one point seem to be occupying similar spaces or same spaces to one another.
And I think the moment that I think might make people most interested in checking out the Green Fog is the scene from Vertigo that takes place in the forest of the great redwood trees. That is reconstructed with an in-sync music video, also set in that forest. So you should know that is waiting in store for you when you watch the Green Fog.
I don't think there's any way to see it right now, so
it will be eventually. It'll be available.
So we put a really exclusive movie on our top 10. Is that how this happened?
That's how cool we are. Everything is exclusive. Have you heard about this? Well, you're not a movie fan then. All right. Number 9, Lydia.
Our 9th movie is the directorial debut of one Bing Liu. If you've heard of it, it kind of just looks like it might be a skateboard movie. He started making it going back to when he was 17, just filming himself and his friends. The two main friends in the movie are Kiere and Zach. But over the course of putting this documentary together, he starts to uncover these histories of domestic abuse in his friends' lives and in his life, and he connects that in a really poignant way to both skateboarding, what he and his friends were getting out of it, and also the way that not skateboarding but the domestic abuse is starting to shape the way their adult lives are going. It's a really, really, really impressive self-examination and examination of his friends. It comes from a place of real deep empathy, but also I think a lot of maturity. It takes a lot to look at your own life and maybe the way if your dad abused you as a child and be like, oh no, now I'm abusing my girlfriend or my child, or how am I recreating this? But also, I don't know. I liked a lot of the skateboarding stuff in it. I think it's, really impressive camera work. It feels really free and joyful. But there's also this darkness underneath it too. That sounds kind of pretentious.
No, I think that's accurate.
But it's there. It's awesome. It's so impressive. I really hope that Bing Liu gets to continue to make films or turns his eye to some other documentary subject. I don't know what he wants to do, but here he is.
There's a lot of really just deeply emotional moments in this movie, not only between him and like his friends, but you also have his interview that he's doing with his mom and kind of letting her in on some of the abuse that he took from his father that intercuts throughout the movie at times. It's also he doesn't usually like bring the camera on himself, but he does partially for that interview, and it kind of almost it changes over from being this me and my friends in this place in the Midwest to this much more personal film. It's very striking and it's striking in a good way. It's very impressive.
But does anybody? Y'all talked about it fairly recently, I think.
I just echo everything Lydia said. I think it's so impressive in its camera work. It's so moving in the emotions it ends up exploring. It is a work of real maturity, like you said. It's almost like using documentary to capture maturity happening in real time. And I think it's really valuable for that reason.
And it's on Hulu for those who would like to check it out. So let's move on to number 8. Dylan, we're turning it back to you.
Okay. So number 8 is Zama by Lucretia Martel. That was, I guess, technically a 2017 movie, but we watched it last year for sure, right?
Yeah, the New York release was 2018.
Right. But so, Andrew, if you don't mind introing this, because I feel like you rewatched it most recently.
Yeah, I actually watched this movie 3 times over the course of 2018, so I feel like I have a pretty good grasp on what's going on. Jessica watched it once over the course of a month.
It took me forever to finish this movie. I started it and then stopped it and then started it and then stopped it.
It is a movie that requires you to be...
I mean, that fits the narrative.
Yeah, it does. So the narrative, for people who are unfamiliar with Zama, it is from the perspective of a colonist official from Spain who's working with the Spanish colonial system to colonize some small country in Latin America. And we find out very early on that he wants 2 things. One, he wants to leave Latin America and go back to, I think he wants to go to Lerma. And B, he wants to get laid. And neither one of those things end up happening for Don Diego de Zama, the colonialist in question. And the movie is a very slow, very atmospheric, kind of dark comedy about him getting all of his desires snatched away from him. There are some really amazing surrealist moments in the film where reality breaks and you hear this odd high frequency humming that drops ever so slightly as you see his hopes be dashed yet again. I think it's a really strong, small musical flourish that makes the movie all the more strong in those moments. And Lucretia Martel just has a really great way of capturing sensory experience on film. She talks about in her interviews the way that she thinks that sound is equally as important as images when she's constructing a film, and you really get a sense of that watching Zama. Everything just sounds alive. You're always hearing, sort of like we talked about with the Pitchapong short Blue that played at TIFF earlier last year. There's just so much ambiance and like the nature and the wildlife. And it feels like you can kind of reach out and touch everything. It has a great sense of texture to it. And I think it's just very easy to get hypnotized by this movie if you're watching it in optimal conditions, which I guess Jessica was not.
I wasn't.
Yeah.
That's true. So, if I wanted to watch more Martel movies, where would I go from here if this is my first one?
I mean, I think that this is definitely the most accessible. I've seen 3 of them. I've also seen La Ciénaga and The Headless Woman. The Headless Woman has a main character, but not really a narrative. It mostly focuses on an event that may or may not have happened, and you don't actually see it happen. And then La Cienega doesn't really even have a main character. You're just seeing this very large, very dysfunctional family, and the camera's sort of swirling around them for the entire film. And I found that really hard to attach myself to. But I don't know. Lydia and Dylan, you guys have seen some of her other stuff as well. Any recommendations?
I liked A Headless Woman. You said not a lot narratively happens, but it's this very like hyper focused in on this one woman's kind of limited perspective of the world. It kind of reminded me of Jean Dielman. Not as long, or obviously nothing is happening, quote unquote, nothing is happening, but she's also kind of trapped in like a really specific way. And like nobody really believes her when she thinks something is wrong, or she doesn't know how to talk about it. And, like, psychologically speaking, it's real interesting, I think.
To both that point of a locked in perspective and Andrew talking about like really deep ambient score and sounds in Zama, for sure, that I think what I've noticed that Martel does is really lock in to like a long lens. So it captures a lot of depth, but it can like really make the actual screen space very tight on like a few parts of a space itself, and then like a characters within it. So it can make all those sounds, and particularly in Zama, make you feel really paranoid while you're watching it. Like the whole jungle and all the sounds around it just really start to creep into the perspective of the character that you're watching. And so watching poor Don Diego, if we want to call him that, fall into, humility of many different kinds is its own special.
He kind of deserves it.
Yeah,
though.
right. That's what I mean when I say poor Don Diego, because he
He's a colonizer.
the look of like anxiousness, but also just complete indignation that's on that actor's face, like ripples throughout that movie. And it is so much that it does, as terrifying as parts of those movies can be and feel like, makes it near comedy. Of just this dude basically.
It's very funny. I think
this dude bumbling for like 2 or 3 different outcomes, but none of it happening, and him just being stuck in a space that he super doesn't care about, and it's just it's a lot, and it is as I agree with Lydia, it's very funny.
Well, you can watch Zama if you would like to on Amazon Prime. It is available there. I'd like to also mention, just as a fun note, that Martel was approached by Marvel to direct a movie. That sounds hilarious.
I'd watch it.
It was Black Widow. Can you
Yeah.
imagine the Black Widow film directed by Lucretia Martel getting to be Lucretia Martel?
I mean, just like super locked in on.
It would have been something. All right,
would
our
watch
number
it.
7 movie, but it's number 1 in Jessica's heart. Take it away.
All right, drum roll, please, everybody. Coming in at lucky number 7 is everyone's favorite bear. That's right, I'm talking about Paddington Bear, starring in the sequel to his first movie, Paddington 2. I really love this movie, you guys. I can't help it. I'm super biased. But anyways, so in this movie, in the sequel, Paddington is settled in with the Brown family. He has a routine. He knows all the neighbors. He's getting to know everybody. He's starting to find his place in London. And he hangs out at Mr. Gruber's antique shop. And he's looking for a present for Aunt Lucy because it's going to be her 100th birthday. And he sees this picture book and he's like, this is going to be the perfect gift for her. And in a really beautiful sequence in the movie, he imagines himself walking through the picture book. And it's like, it's animated and he's walking through it and he pictures Aunt Lucy like in the scenes in the picture book. And he's like, this is the perfect gift to give her. And then a thief steals the book Paddington gets caught in a bunch of shenanigans where he ends up going to jail, which starts the whole like Grand Budapest-y hotel prison thing. He hangs out with Knuckles McGinty, played by Brendan Gleeson, and he gets out of jail, saves the day. Everything works out.
You're just gonna recap the whole movie, huh?
Yes, I'm basically doing like that A Dog's Journey trailer where I just give the whole entire thing. Like I give a whole summary of what the whole movie is. But anyways. Anyways, I really love this movie. I think it's super heartfelt and amazing. And I know that there are people among us who are like, you know, okay, it's a cute movie or it's boring, I don't get it. But there's just something beautiful about it that every time like I watch this movie, I feel like there's hope in the world. And I know that sounds stupid to some people, but I believe it in my heart. So there you go. That's my thing about Paddington 2.
All the bear wants to do is get this dang picture book to his Aunt Lucy, and he goes to jail for it. What's going on? There's a whole storyline in this that's about Paddington Bear going to jail. It's amazing. Hugh Grant has a musical number at the end of this. It like channels Umbrellas of Cherbourg. It's like A+. It's some good stuff. It's some good stuff. There are people who don't like it. They're not good people, so that's fine. You know, that's just what it is. They've come to peace with that. That's just their thing. So I'm just saying that Paddington 2 is amazing.
Every time I think about friendship, just the concept of friendship, I think about the scene where Knuckles McGinty and Paddington are making marmalade together. Like when he teaches him how to make marmalade, and it's just like that is the true picture of friendship.
His name is Knuckles McGinty. How do you not like that? It's Knuckles McGinty.
Should Lydia and I speak on this movie? We've been subtweeted a whole lot.
No, I don't. I don't care about your opinion on this. All right, Paddington 2.
Yeah,
It's available where joy is found. And
I'm glad you think there's hope in the world.
other opinions are available.
Other opinions are available.
but not asked for. All right. Number 6, Lydia. Now you can talk.
Okay, this one is very different from Paddington 2. It's Sorry to Bother You by Boots Riley. This is also his first film, although he's a musician, and he's got an album also called Sorry to Bother You that's come out a few years ago. But the story, I guess, it follows Lakeith Stanfield, who's Cassius Green, and he gets a job as a telemarketer because he's trying to make money because he's living in his uncle's garage with his girlfriend, and his uncle's afraid he's going to lose his house. It sounds like pretty goofy and kind of lighthearted just from that little elevator pitch, but I watched it again last night, and I found it actually real horrifying and a lot less funny than the first time I watched it. Mostly because it's also very surreal and like a real pointed critique of capitalism, our current society, a lot of, I think, big corporations such as Amazon and...
You don't have to whisper it. It's not like they're going to shut us down.
One of the...
Oh, hold on, Jeff. I'm getting a text. Oh, yeah, guys, we've been shut down. Jeff Bezos is not.
Jeff Bezos bought our
Lydia,
podcast.
you did it this time. You really stepped in it this time.
Because the thing, because what he's worried about is his uncle, in order to stave, because he thinks he's going to lose his house, is considering signing a contract with this group called Worry Free, and they paint it as like this really utopian, we give you a house, or not a house, we give you a bed, and 3 square meals a day, and then you just work for us until you die. Isn't that a good deal? And it's basically, the movie points out, like, this is modern slavery. They use worry free to like build all your cell phones or do all the jobs. I think it's cell phones or whatever production. Doesn't matter. They kind of get in. Sorry. I'm getting overwhelmed with that one.
Sorry to bother you, but what did other people think of this movie? Because I feel like it was a little bit, no one divisive, but some of the people on this podcast were a little bit more mellow on it.
Oh, now you want to hear other people's opinions.
Yeah, that's how democracy works. So other people's opinions?
I mean, the episode where we first talked about it, I think it was you, Zach, me, and Michael O'Malley maybe went over it. We went really in depth, so you can go back and listen to that episode if you'd like to know the full extent of our thoughts. I had a hard time putting it on my top 10. I did not put it on my top 10 because although I agree with most of the ideas contained within the movie, and I think that they're articulated in a way that's really cutting, it is not a movie that I can on any level enjoy anymore. It's funny while you're watching it, but like you said, Lydia, after that first experience is over, it's just kind of horrifying and unpleasant. And that is probably a positive on the movie's end, not a negative. But ultimately, I felt that of the portraits of hopelessness offered to us in movies this year, this was not the one that resonated with me the most.
Lydia, would you compare Sorry to Bother You at all with, I know was your top movie from the past year, Death of Stalin, which is also something that's kind of probing, even though it's a historical, dark comedy, it's kind of probing current issues in a way that's, I mean, you're kind of laughing during it, but also it's terrifying.
Yes, I actually think that's probably what spoke to me most about it, because my top 3 were Death of Stalin, First Reformed, and then this, and none of them paint particularly hopeful pictures of the world, which is probably why I didn't like Paddington 2. But
nice little insert there.
just and I think what I like so much about it is using humor, and I don't necessarily think it has to leave you feeling good. I mean, it's absurd, and
no, I mean, like, for sure, that's a me problem,
yeah,
not a movie problem.
Really sharp observations. And they hurt.
Well, Sorry to Bother You, if you would like to check it out, is on Hulu. So we are going to take a short break, and then we'll be back with our 5 through 1 of our top 10 list. Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Zach Dennis with an important message because I have not talked to you enough during this episode. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money. We're not clamoring for your dollars. At this time, we just want to enjoy each other's company and talk about the movies and feel our, distribute our thoughts to the world and become podcasting moguls. Simple stuff. No money involved. However, there are a few things that you could do to help out the show. We would really appreciate it. The first thing is review us on iTunes. I know literally every podcast asks you this. They're like, please review us on iTunes. But it's like important because I don't know, iTunes, this is just what they do. This is how the Apple lords constrict us and keep us in their system. That's just what happens. So we need a nice little review. Just take like 2 minutes one day, be like, this is podcast review time. Put us on the list. Secondly, you can tweet us. We're at Cinematary on Twitter, or better yet, send us an email. We're cinematary@yahoo.com so we can hear from you. If you're just like Zach, you have terrible taste. Why do you keep talking about these superhero movies? You keep talking about these Japanese movies where all they do is drink sake and smoke cigarettes and talk about how life's awful. And I'll be like, yeah, but you're wrong. And you'll be like, yeah, but I'm just emailing you. And it'll be a whole thing. It'll be a nice discourse. Think about it. And finally, please tell your friends and family, they should know as well. I'm sure they like movies. I'm sure they like podcasts. We don't know. To recap, review on iTunes Review Day. Do that. Secondly, send your thoughts, Twitter, email. One of those. Do it. Third, share with your friends and family. We would love it. Do it. Please. Thank you. Now, let's get back to the show. And we are back with our 5 through 1 movies of the year. Hopefully this will be a lot better. A little all over the place in that first part. Yeah, we're going to start with number 5. It is 8th Grade. It's directed by Bo Burnham. As you can tell from the title, it's about a girl who is in her last week of 8th grade. It's Kayla. She is in her last week before she heads off to high school. She is it shows her dealing with just the tidal wave of just being a 13-year-old in 2018. You also have in the movie where she kind of goes to a high school and shadows somebody and gets an idea of what that is going to be like. You also have her interacting with her father, who is a single parent. I know a lot of people have talked about this movie. We talked about this on the podcast. Andrew wrote about it extensively. The thing I really liked about this movie, outside of just the, there's that degree of it where everybody kind of can relate to it. Everybody's been in 8th grade. Everyone's been awkward and has had these anxious feelings that you watch Kayla kind of go through, and that's what makes it, I guess, more difficult for some people to watch the movie than others. The one thing, though, that really impressed me about 8th grade, and this is more a testament to Bo Burnham's directing, was how it captured the internet age and teenagers using, their life has been filtered through the internet. They're the entire time. They have no alternative. I think that for us, we have that to an extent, but we also had at least some period of time where there was at least limited internet. And in 8th grade, you're watching Kayla get on Snapchat, get on Instagram. Immediately when she wakes up, she's using YouTube tutorials in order to help her with her makeup. There's just this entire filtration system that the internet is, and is all encompassing. And I felt like Burnham really captures this in less of there is this degree of kind of scariness to it, because I think that for some you would want a little less degree of the internet consuming your life. But I also think he finds it, some sort of empathetic lens to an extent. Like Kayla, while she's awkward, struggles to talk with people and make friends and make connections, she also is clearly a very intelligent person. I really like the beginning of the movie as we go through this long opening video that she's doing for her YouTube channel, and she's working through ideas in her mind, and it's really wonderful because you can see that she's like critically thinking about stuff and trying to form her own ideas, but is also just very a little bit terrified of exerting this amount of emotionality from showing this emotional side of her on this platform that lives on forever, and also just kind of worries that people are even paying attention at all. And that's something that kind of crops up, I feel like, for most people who are being creative and being on the internet. I know a lot of you all also saw 8th grade. What are your impressions of this movie?
I also liked it a whole lot. It was very high on my own top 10 list. I think that in addition to a lot of the things that you said and the things that I wrote about for my piece, I think that Bo Burnham really directs this movie well. It is such a heightened sense of anxiety and nervousness and joy, in those moments of joy as well. We are very much like tunnel vision through Kayla's eyes for most of this film. I think about the scene at the pool party that she shows up at, and just this really like ominous Jaws-like score that's playing on this overdriven synthesizer as she looks out at all the other kids playing and having fun, and her feeling like there's no possible way she's going to be able to act as natural as they are. It's a moment that maybe you could criticize for being too over the top, but I think that adolescence is a very over the top time in your life, and I like that he's using cinematic techniques that are really exaggerated to make those feelings real in the moment as Kayla's experiencing them.
Yeah, that's really true. The directing, granted this is his directorial debut, is incredibly impressive because it does just fully immerse you. I think we talked a couple weeks ago about kind of computer movies and how movies are trying to capture just life through a computer screen, and this one is less. We talked, I think, in relation to Searching, which is one that completely takes place on a computer screen. But there's some moments here just while it's filtered through phones or computers or what have you that I feel like are some of the best examples of computers on movies, where you feel that kind of overwhelmingness of just information, not just about people, about what's happening, just anything, just information completely barraging you and almost assaulting you. There's that one scene where she's going through, I think, Instagram, and there's all these superimpositions of the different things that she's looking at, and it's just it's just so overwhelming, and that's kind of what it feels like at times going through a social media website and trying to process everything that's happening.
I think that moment is meant to feel comforting to her, like she's being warmly enveloped in all of these very familiar, amusing, pleasant images. That this is what she does in her downtime to relax, and the music, the Enya music that's played over it, really emphasizes that as well.
It almost feels like a party scene, except it's just her in the room.
Yeah.
There's a bit too. That particularly that you alluded to, Zach, about her going to high school to shadow the older kids. And then there's a part where Kayla gets invited to the mall and she's super excited, and they end up sitting, in the food court area. And there's a moment where one of the guys just, I guess, sees her phase out, just kind of zone out for a second. And he brings up the fact that, she's younger and that that they are potentially boring her. And there's this technological gap that he uses as kind of like a excuse potentially of the difference between keeping people's attention and being together with one another, even though I think it's particularly played for laughs in that moment, but it speaks to a through line throughout the movie, particularly with her dad. But to zone in to even the difference of maybe 4 years between people would be enough to have a generational difference is a potentially dreadful piece of theme that the movie incorporates in just such small moments like that, even as jokes.
Yeah, it's a kind of micro comment on just the rapid movement that the internet has, because it's constantly evolving and constantly becoming different things, and you kind of think that you have this one idea of how it operates, and then it completely changes, and so then you have this quote generational gap that happens after just 5 years. He's kind of remarking on how early she got Snapchat, as if that's a rite of passage, and that's a relatively new thing. I think that if it was 5 years older, it would be like Facebook, or actually even maybe 10 years older. It's constantly changing. But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that was exactly the point I was going to make, that he used that Snapchat as some kind of benchmark of age. It's wait, how young were you when you got Snapchat? That it was a notion that, as Andrew and you already pointed out, that she is, fully incorporated herself into these parts of the internet. And so she's just kind of swimming in it, while from the outside, it can be intimidating and daunting. That's just kind of her life.
Well, 8th Grade, if you have Canopy, you can watch it on that, and then I believe it'll be on Amazon Prime, as A24 has a deal with Prime as well for their movies, so please check it out. If you're listening to this episode over the weekend that it's released, it's currently available to rent for 99 cents on iTunes, so you can do it that way as well. Well, let's move on to our number 4 movie of the year, and Jessica, it's all you.
All right, coming in at number 4 is Night is Short, Walk On Girl. Not to be confused with At the Beach Alone at Night is Short, Walk On Girl walks home alone at night.
Oh, God.
Anyways, it's directed by Masaaki Yuasa, and I saw this film super early on in 2018, and it is one that I could not stop thinking about. And it is also a movie that I've wanted to rewatch, but because of the accessibility of it, I haven't been able to.
It played one night as a Fathom event in the United States.
Yep, so apparently it's going to get a release on Blu-ray sometime soon, so look out for that. But the film follows an unnamed woman. We'll call her the girl, the titular girl with black hair.
She's not in the title. Oh yeah, she is in the. You're right. Sorry. Go ahead.
This is her movie. She walks on. Anyways, and also an unnamed man who's referred to as senpai or senior in the film, and he plans on confessing his feelings for her, so he follows her around at night, and it turns into just this fantastical journey full of just psychedelic imagery. She has like a bottomless pit and just drinks and drinks and drinks, but never gets really drunk. I think that animation was the perfect medium for this film because it just uses amazing colors and it has a way of just submerging you in the world that Yuasa is trying to create. If you like want a more in-depth thing about this movie, then you should read Jordan's review because I thought that it did a really good job of kind of parsing through the movie. But what did everyone else think about this film?
Well, Jordan's whole thing is that it's not a movie that can be described very well. It's a movie that you just have to look at, and so he litters his review with GIFs of the film just to show you how wildly transforming the animation is at every moment and how vivid and high contrast the colors are. But I agree, this was on my top 10 as well. It may be the most energetic and unpredictable movie of the year. I think that the director, Yuasa, I've now seen 3 movies of his, and I think he's very hit or miss. This is the only movie of his that I think is great, but it's because he is so ambitious and he's kind of flailing out his ideas so wildly that it's not always going to work, but here it really, really, really does. And I think he's a bit of a force to be reckoned with on the animation front because there's nothing else that looks quite like this in a hand-drawn animation. So I really hope that people check this out when it's on home video. I hope he has a long career because I want to see more work from this guy.
Yeah, to your point, Andrew, I want to attempt to hold on to something that I feel like he was pulling off with the animation, this intense fluidity of speed. So much of animation, or how we can think about animation sometimes, particularly 2D hand-drawn situations, can be really evocative and convince you of motion, but this movie goes so far as to literally distort the spaces in which, and present a faux camera of sorts, but it as it moves and builds up speed, and particularly when it follows characters running or mad dashing, that it will make you feel a version of the space-time continuum bending and just being pushed and pulled. And there is a through line in the movie of people's age in different times and how you experience time and life and speed at different parts of it. That was very surprising that he committed to just actually making the animation pull you along in that way, to actively feel those different perspectives in that way. So I don't know how else you could do that with that except through animation on some level, without it being almost nausea inducing with a live action camera. So
good job.
Lydia, any other thoughts from you on this one?
Just co-sign what everyone else said. I also think it's just fun. It's a pretty quick, snappy film, but you meet a ton of really interesting characters too, outside of the unnamed man and unnamed titular girl. And it's just really good character sketches, and it's just really memorable. the Club of Sophos and the guerrilla theater group. It's great.
Well, hopefully this one will find some sort of distribution streaming wise or home video wise so that people can check it out soon. This number 3 movie, though, I've seen some people kind of refer to as somewhat of an American version of Yuasha's animation style. So, Andrew, I'm going to let you take it over.
Really makes sense for these two movies to be next to each other in our top 10. 4 being Night is Short, and number 3 being Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, another movie that really could only exist in the world of animation. I'm as shocked as anybody else that a Spider-Man movie is this high on our top 10. This is the 4th reboot of the Spider-Man film franchise. It's a very new take on the Spider-Man story that we've heard so many times. It's following a Afro-Latino Spider-Man by the name of Miles Morales. And stories like Spider-Man and Superman and Batman have all been ingrained into our cultural consciousness for such a long time that their super fans tend to get angry when you break from canon. I'm thinking about the response to The Last Jedi and the response to the Ghostbusters reboot and stuff like that. You can kind of imagine that happening with Into the Spider-Verse, and the movie doesn't quite thumb its nose at those toxic fan bases, but it's like exploding the idea of a canon itself. This idea there's only one way to tell this kind of story. This is a movie that really understands that stories exist to be retold and to be changed, and it is really marveling at the possibilities that are available in adaptation. And there is a lot of fun to be had with the new characters that are presented to us here, whether it's Miles Morales or Spider-Gwen Stacy, the Spider-Man Noir played by Nicolas Cage, or Spider-Ham played by John Mulaney. But the real reason why this is so high on the top of our list and so many people's list is the craft and the way this is made as an animated film. I think it's the first CGI animated film ever that feels truly radical in its style. CGI features kind of birthed from Toy Story in 1995, and that was a really groundbreaking movie. It established a new form and a new kind of children's filmmaking. But the form hasn't really evolved much since Toy Story. People have mostly tried to stick to that Pixar formula. And this is the first movie to very boldly break from that. I remember there was a question that was asked by Twitter film critic Alyssa Heflin. She asked, is there a CG animated movie that you would consider a masterpiece? I'm not talking like just good, but rather no holds barred, capital M masterpiece. And I and a lot of folks in the comments were kind of stunned to realize that it's very hard to think of a title that could count in that category. And I don't think that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is quite a capital M masterpiece. I think it has some problems with it, but it's the first animated film I ever watched where I felt like the animators were trying to make the best animated film of all time. That was their goal. And so I've been reading some interviews with the animators. There's a lot to be read out there about how they made this film on a technical level. They had to rewrite and break a bunch of animation algorithms to make this thing work. There's a really unorthodox combination of animating on ones versus animating on twos. That's like how many times the images are refreshing, how many frames an image exists in. And so the result is this kaleidoscopic, hyperkinetic imagery. There are parts of it that exist in this weird boundless digital space that don't have any walls or floors or ceilings. I watched it twice, once in 3D, and it really feels like it's made to be watched in 3D. It has so many different textures just colliding with each other. It's borrowing from the screen printing that was done to make actual comics. It's pulling from cel-shaded video games, urban graffiti, classic Warner Brothers cartoons, and it, like Zach said, it is indebted to the world of anime too. It moves in this way that I can really only compare to Masaki Yuasa or Hideaki Anno, who made End of Evangelion, and It's not perfect, like I said. I think the narrative is a bit messy. I think the thematics don't all come together. There are parts where it seems to enter into some uncanny valley territory, but that was true in the early days of Pixar as well when they were breaking new ground. So I think because new ground is being broken here, there are gonna be some bugs and some things that don't quite work, but it is kind of reinvigorating to see something this new in the world of kids animation.
Yeah, I want to. The one thing to jump back on is your point about it breaking the Pixar formula, because Tasha Robinson had a really interesting interview with the animators at The Verge, and that's kind of what she was talking about. Was I think people think when you say like the Pixar formula there or the Disney formula, it's more like the narrative structure or kind of the emotional beats that the movie will hit. I think that's usually what that phrase means, and what they were meaning was no, there's literally this one software of animation that people use now, these studios are using to make movies, and we had to deconstruct that and build it back up, which is just absurd and crazy. And you can immediately tell if you go and see this movie, it is like you said, the narrative is fine. It's very enjoyable, and it does have this great deconstruction of adaptation that I think is really remarkable at times, especially for a movie that's a Spider-Man. It's the fourth iteration of a Spider-Man movie, but what's really so revolutionary about it is just how they just completely take this CG model that we're used to seeing with Pixar movies or DreamWorks movies or whatever stupid company makes the Minions movies, and just readjusting how we view something and reminding us that animation has this limitless possibility, and we've got stuck in this rut because we cried at the first 10 minutes of Up one time. So sorry Up, but you got thrown shade.
I really like Miles as a character. I think that the writing for him was really great, and even if you take away all of the Spider-Man stuff and make it just a coming-of-age movie, like the beginning where we're just following him as he's going to this new school, like I would watch that movie in a minute.
Yeah.
I felt bad because we don't do ties that this didn't end up on my list, but as Andrew said, both this and Night is Short really play with similar feelings and senses. So I wouldn't be too surprised. I kind of wanted them to tie. Just from they do in my own head, but for the list's sake. But so how this movie plays with people's appreciation of art and music is fun to me. I mean, it opens up with Miles's character singing or humming this song and not knowing all the lyrics, but still totally committing to humming along with it in his own broken way. That gets used as an ability plot device later of him learning how to calm down and become invisible. But on a larger level in the movie, I think it, as Zach pointed out, especially about adaptation and adapting different styles and reversions of the Spider-Man story, that it goes a long way to integrating for an audience the whole feeling of it and how it can branch off and be multiple, as opposed to, as you guys mentioned, a singular canon of sorts. So, I mean, it is like that very concept is ingrained in what this movie tries to tackle.
It's also a
with.
really, really funny movie. Like, Phil Lord and Chris Miller produced it, right?
Yeah, and Phil Lord co-wrote it. So
yeah.
So like, it's also just really enjoyable and lighthearted. I mean, it's serious, some thematic stuff, but good jokes.
Yeah, trying to pull off a gross wreck of a Spider-Man or Peter Parker in that relationship that he had trying to coach Miles Morales was silly in parts for sure, but yeah, it was good comedy.
well, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse is in theaters now, so you still have time to check it out. Andrew, you're taking number 2 as well.
Yes, so number 2 is also my number 2 movie of the year, and that is Support the Girls by Andrew Bajowski, the Great American Restaurant film. That's not my phrase, that's from Rolling Stone. But this movie stars Regina Hall as the general manager of a small Hooters competitor called Double Whammies. This is very much a performance-driven film. Bajowski comes from the mumblecore scene. He has a knack for working with actors, making a space where these humane, believable performances can come out of any scenario, no matter how absurd. And Regina Hall, at the center of this thing, gives, I think, the best female performance of the year. She is this saintly yet understandably frustrated woman who's clearly spent a long time trying to be all things to all people as a member of the service industry. And the other characters in the movie serve sort of as foils for her, her employees, that is. On the one hand, we have the great Haley Lou Richardson, who does this fantastic job as a woman who has an irrational amount of enthusiasm for her job at Double Whammies. And on the other hand, we have the rapper Jungle Pussy, who just could not give less of a fuck. Her line delivery is so blunt. She's the real MVP of this movie. And I think that both of those two, Haley Richardson and Jungle Pussy, are actresses that can just crack you up with a glance without even using a line. The whole movie has this real lightness of touch about it. Bajowski doesn't over-direct it, so it's sort of like the opposite Eighth Grade in that regard. There's no showy camera movements. There's no showy editing tricks. It's all very mundane, very casual, and always subtly profound at the same time. This dude studied under Chantal Ackerman when he was in film school. And, you know, Chantal Ackerman made John Dillman. She pioneered this form of cinema centered on women's work. And Bajowski, I think, is doing a similar thing here. He's taking a setting where women are objectified to this absurd degree. And he's not just taking the obvious pot shots that you could imagine taking at that stuff. He's looking at the emotional lives of the women for whom this is a very normal, acceptable daily routine. And he's looking at the structures and the spaces around them, the late capitalist moment they're living in that has allowed this to become a reality. There's a line that Jungle Pussy delivers about how when something is eating you up inside, you go from crying about it to laughing about it to screaming about it. And this film takes all three of those approaches. It is very unassuming, it's very unpretentious, but it is deeply, thoroughly good and pure to its core. So if this slipped by you, please don't let that happen. It's on Hulu for free right now. Please go watch Support the Girls. It is so great, so great. Other thoughts from you guys about this one?
No, I thought you summed it up perfectly. I want to echo that Regina Hall gives just this remarkable performance. I think that she's an actress that most people associate with being in like romantic comedies and just regular comedies and kind of popping up in outlier movies and not giving performances with, you know, any real nuance. And she just really brings this humanity and this warmness to this character that is just fantastic, that I hope it opens up more roles that are, you know, similar to that, you know, opens up bigger roles for her, because she does such a fantastic job in this movie.
The ending of the movie, in which they all end up looking for jobs again, particularly with the, oh my God, what is it called? Is it called Man Cave? It's called Man Cave.
It's called Man Cave.
Okay. Right. The national chain that is apparently going to take over and subsume their business, that is called Man Cave, is this looming presence throughout the movie, and it even more of a off-screen bit of frustration that really, like, if the performances in and of themselves do not like rope you into their situation and scenario, just having this dread of replacement capitalism just over your head of something as absurd and dumb as Man Cave, and then hearing all the middle manager types basically trying to worm their way into quote unquote better business by convincing themselves that having a metric system for the people who work for them will be how they solve their business problems. It all that stuff kind of happens, like as Andrew said, that the camera work is not exactly pointed. Most of the time, if anything else, it is built for comedy, so like characters will move in and out. But point being that all that stuff is happening on the periphery and just kind of coming in. And so the moment at the end when they're on top of that fucking building and just in the overpass with all the white noise of the traffic and having nothing to do but being pissed off and wanting to scream, that's a hell of a moment. So,
like Andrew said, though, you can watch Support the Girls on Hulu. So if you missed it, please go check it out there. Our number one movie of the year, and I feel like it's been number one and really on the list for a long time, probably starting in the summer when it came out, is First Reformed, the latest film from Paul Schrader. This is a movie. Ethan Hawke plays a pastor at a small church in upstate New York who begins to kind of have a crisis of faith as he is introduced to a young couple played by you have Amanda Seyfried and Phil Ettinger. And Amanda Seyfried's character is pregnant, and then her husband, Philip Ettinger's character, is concerned about having a baby in this modern world with climate change and the other mounting environmental issues that we face, because by the time his child has grown up, she will be living in a hellscape created by man. And so he is not wanting the baby to come into the world and have to live with that. And really, Ethan Hawke doesn't have too much of an answer to that, and begins to spiral as he's also dealing with the work being done to celebrate the anniversary of the church that he runs. The church is really kind of there just for ceremony. It's a very old church that pretty much is a glorified museum. He preaches for all of probably a handful to 10 people, really, of at each service. And the larger church that the mega church that kind of encompasses that is having this giant celebration with the head of Bulk Industries, which is kind of this I don't know, insert any oil energy company you'd like to into that space, who donates a lot of money to the church in order to let this mega church and its subsidiaries have upkeep. But he's also the one who's destroying the set environment that Ethan Hawke is struggling with after talking with Amanda Seyfried and her husband. This is the movie. This movie, I think, a lot of people have been trying to capture, the moment of 2018. I think a lot of people have been trying to really grasp that. I talked on last week's episode about Vice, which is a stupid person's attempt to grasp 2018. But to me, First Reform really understands that, because it is commenting explicitly on events that are currently happening, but at the same time, it's not really. It's like this. It understands that really what encompasses 2018, because I have like PTSD. It's like I'm still living in it. What encompassed 2018 was just this sheer anxiety, like somebody was standing on top of you constantly and you can't really move or do anything, and you just kind of scream. You can't hear your scream. It's just kind of going into the void as everything kind of crumbles around you, and you're unable to do anything about it because your power is meaningless compared to the person who is just standing on top of your stomach. And this movie really gets that, and is somewhat, I don't know if you want to take it as cathartic, because I know that people take the ending in different ways. Don't see it as being that hopeful. It's like this last hurrah before we go into the black oblivion. But First Reformed Man is really just encompassing the anxiety of the current moment in a way that also transcends into there's so many different ways, because you can kind of get into the climate change thing, but I think the other thing also that's really profound about it is commenting on the modern concept of faith. I think Michael O'Malley has a really good write-up on this, and just the idea of faith and its hand-in-handness with money, and how people twist faith in order to meet their own will, rather than really trusting in the thing that they should be believing in, because that's what is in the book that they believe in. And the kind of back and forth and the wavering that Ethan Hawke goes through is just really incredible. I love the scene where he is in the office of the head pastor of the mega church, played by Cedric the Entertainer of all people, and he's just like, we have to do something. And I feel like that's just been the gif of the year. That's just kind of how you can react to really anything. You can really put any issue that's been facing 2018, and you can put that gif, as well as the anxiety of First Reformed, into that space. But yeah, I know a lot of you all had this as your top movie of the year as well. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts added on to this.
Lydia, we haven't heard from you in a minute. Do you want to say anything about First Reformed?
I don't know, something about really despairing perspectives on just the way the world is speaks to me. I don't know, this movie terrified me, like a lot of my top movies did. I mean, people talk about the, what is it, magical something sequence?
Magical Mystery Tour.
Magical Mystery Tour sequence with Amanda, and that's kind of supposed to be, I don't know, like really spiritual, but there's also part of it where it kind of goes over, like, you know, forests that are burning and like tire dumps and like pieces of ice falling off.
But like infinite tire dumps.
Pieces of ice falling off the polar caps, and it's just like, yeah, that. And I really appreciate, because, well, you can feel how angry Paul Schrader is. Like, this movie is furious also. I mean, somebody has to do something, but I think it's really succinctly pointing its finger at who Schrader thinks is responsible, which I appreciate. Again, like, very clear picture of things that are wrong.
And I think that Schrader is aware of the fact that ordinary people like Ethan Hawke's character are fairly powerless to do anything about it. There are things that could be done, but not by us. We don't have the power to change them. And I think that that's what sets this apart from some of the other movies about how terrible things are right now. It is looking for hope. It desperately wants there to be hope, but not necessarily seeing any for people who don't have a great amount of power. And I think that on top of all the relevance and the emotions that this movie stirs up, I think on top of Ethan Hawke's performance, this is also the best made movie of the year as well. It's very confidently directed, using a series of techniques that Paul Schrader has studied extensively since the 1970s with his book Transcendental Style in Narrative Cinema. And just think about that opening shot of the church, very low to the ground camera, slowly moving up to this church, and how long that shot lasts. And I haven't seen an opening note to a movie quite as confident as how First Reformed opens. Darren talked about this when he saw it at TIFF in 2017 as being a movie that it feels like the frame itself has a tension in it, like it's placing tension on the images in the frame. I've also heard it described by somebody on Twitter as a movie that it seems like every image could have a ghost in it. There's just something about the like tense, foreboding atmosphere of this movie that can really only be captured in movies. So I think this thing is definitely working on every level. It is my number one movie of the year as well.
So to that point, Andrew, then in this certain level of haunting and anxiety, that it creates that, as you say, with absence, as opposed to necessarily what is directly in it. It is a part of it, but to your point about ghosts, that each frame, especially when Ethan Hawke is alone in his little house next to the chapel, that is just can be read as haunted and haunting. And it is sad and disturbing then when, as Zach was definitely bringing up about faith and crisis of faith, in which the church, in which seems to be profiting and, actually having more of a congregation and a place for people to be, that Ethan Hawke just kind of goes to intermittently for community service, that they basically are telling people to shut out anxiety, like in ways in which that these are too big of worries for you, so you might as well ignore them. Like, anxiety is actually a bad thing. That voice in your head, you should ignore that. It is actually steering you in the wrong direction. And in a different direction. The difference between that and just being kind and polite is that this one is more twisted up with the idea of abundancy and plentifulness.
Yeah, it's prosperity gospel.
In which it'll be fine, just keep walking forward, and it becomes a lot more sad towards as the movie builds up that anxiety for the audience and through Ethan Hawke's character. That in that way it can feel, as Lydia said, deeply despairing lens of current situation, but to walk through it and to see how parts of the rhetoric and people's feelings on it, and to Zach's point about it feeling something that is beyond even just 2018, because of particularly what it's talking about is such a long form thing on such a time scale that is usually beyond one human life, that the overwhelmingness of the situation is a lot. So I watched it as basically the last film with that and Green Fog for the year, and just to remember parts of the movie's despair and its hauntingness, and it did it. So that was how I wrung out New Year's Eve in movies, pretty much. So would recommend it, and it's on Amazon Prime, right?
And that's how we're gonna ring out this year. 2018. Fuck it. First form, it's on Amazon Prime as well as Canopy, and you should watch it on Canopy. Don't give Bezos that money. He already fired us. He already
canceled our podcast.
Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter at handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary, where we post all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. We're going to be kicking off our actor series, which we have started the year off with. The past 2 years, we pair up two actors, or an actor and an actress together, and watch their movies and kind of in somewhat comparison. We won't give you the actress yet because we're going to be a little bit secretive, but we will tell you that our next episode will kick off our actor portion with Wheels on Meals, which I guarantee you I will call Meals on Wheels next week. But we're going to be talking about Jackie Chan and going through a host of his movies. We'll be doing Wheels on Meals, Police Story, The Legend of Drunken Master, Rush Hour 2, and Kung Fu Yoga, which I'm already signing Dylan up for. Dylan needs to watch Kung Fu Yoga. Yeah, but we will be. I'm excited to talk about Jackie Chan. He's somebody who I think it's going to be incredibly exciting to watch some of his Hong Kong cinema and get that perspective for somebody who is kind of has this more. I think people are much more familiar with his American work. So it'll be fun. Check it out. We'll have the full list on cinematary.com. Until next week, though, thank you guys for listening and have a wonderful start to your 2019.